The morning he slid those documents across the kitchen table and told me to sign, I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and looked at him the way you look at someone you've already said goodbye to in your mind. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had filed my own papers 48 hours earlier. My name is Raven. I'm 43 years old, and this is the story of how I dismantled the life someone tried to steal from me, quietly, methodically, and without a single moment of regret. 3 weeks ago, in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Chicago, a man I had loved for 11 years sat across from me with a folder he thought contained my surrender. The air conditioning hummed at a frequency that made the silence feel clinical. He had brought his attorney, a sharp-faced man named Gerald who smelled faintly of cedar and arrogance. My attorney, Nora, sat beside me in a charcoal blazer, her pen resting untouched on the table. I watched Marcus arrange his papers, and I thought about my grandmother's hands. I thought about what she told me the summer I turned 19, sitting on her porch in the August heat while the cicadas made the whole yard sound like it was vibrating. What they didn't know was that I had spent the last 4 months building a wall they couldn't see, and behind it, everything that mattered was already safe. But before I tell you what happened in that conference room, I need to take you back to 2009, to a small apartment in Wicker Park with water-stained ceilings and a radiator that banged every night at 2 a.m. like it was trying to get out. That's where Raven Ashworth built her first company from nothing but a laptop, a library card, and 11 years' worth of stubbornness. Before I continue, if you found yourself here because something in those first few lines felt uncomfortably familiar, I want you to take a moment and subscribe. Not as a transaction, but because the rest of this story is going to go somewhere you need to hear. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I genuinely want to know who's with me right now. Now let me take you back to where this really begins. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Elmwood Park, in a house that was always warm, but not always kind. My father, Robert, was a mechanical engineer who believed deeply in hard work and said almost nothing about love. My mother, Patricia, was the kind of woman who kept the house immaculate and her disappointments even more organized. I was the middle child. There was my older brother Brian, who could do no wrong, and my younger sister Stephanie, who was fragile in ways the family treated as precious. I was neither protected nor celebrated. I was expected to be capable and quietly invisible about it. I learned early to watch, not because anyone asked me to, but because no one was watching out for me. I noticed when the numbers didn't add up. I noticed when someone's story changed between Monday and Thursday. I noticed patterns. My third-grade teacher once wrote on my report card, "Raven has an unusually developed sense of observation for her age." My mother framed it as criticism. I kept it as a compliment. The person who saw me, really saw me, was my grandmother Adele. She lived 40 minutes from us in a house that smelled of cardamom and old books, and she had a habit of saying things that didn't fully make sense until years later. One August afternoon when I was 19, sitting on her porch shelling snap peas into a metal bowl, she looked at me sideways and said, "Raven, the most powerful thing a woman can own is something no one knows she has." I laughed. I thought she meant jewelry or a savings account. I didn't understand what she meant that day. Not for another 24 years. I met Marcus Cole at a fundraiser in the fall of 2011. He was 36, handsome in a careful, deliberate way, and he laughed at the right moments. He worked in commercial real estate development and talked about integrity the way people do when they're performing it, rather than practicing it. I was 28, 2 years into running my own financial consulting firm, and I genuinely thought, that I had found someone who respected ambition because he had his own. We were married in June of 2013, in a ceremony with 87 guests at a venue overlooking Lake Michigan. The wedding cost $34,000. I paid for exactly half. Marcus said that was important to him. equal partnership. I remember writing that check and feeling proud of what it symbolized. For the first 4 years, the marriage worked. Not perfectly, nothing real ever is, but honestly, with effort and friction and genuine repair. My company grew. By 2016, Ashworth Financial Consulting had 6 employees, $1.3 million in annual revenue, and a client list I had built contact by contact, meeting by meeting, cold call by cold call. Marcus's real estate portfolio was doing well too, and for a while we moved through our life like two people who had chosen each other correctly. Then something shifted. It was subtle at first, the way subtle things always are. He began referring to my company as your little firm. He started arriving at dinner parties and introducing me as my wife, who does financial consulting. The same flat way you'd mention a hobby. When I landed a contract with a regional hospital system worth $280,000 in annual retainer fees, he took me to dinner to celebrate and spent most of the meal talking about a building he was eyeing in the West Loop. I noticed. I filed it away. I didn't say anything yet. The first concrete moment came on a Tuesday in October of 2022 at 7:18 p.m. I know the time because I had just glanced at the microwave clock when Marcus walked into the kitchen and said, without preamble, without ceremony, "I've been talking to an advisor, and I think it makes more sense for Ashworth Financial to be structured under my holding company, for tax purposes." He said it the way you'd suggest rearranging furniture. I set down the knife I was using to chop celery. I looked at him. I said, "Let's talk about that properly, not tonight." He nodded like it was settled. It wasn't settled. But I didn't tell him that. Over the following 6 weeks, the conversations became less subtle. He brought in numbers, selectively chosen, I later confirmed, suggesting that folding my firm into his holdings would save us approximately $47,000 per year in combined tax liability. He had a friend, he said, an attorney who could structure the paperwork cleanly. He kept saying us and we in ways that dissolved the boundaries between his assets and mine in a manner I recognized, because I had seen this structure before, in clients' divorces, in financial reorganizations that left one party significantly diminished. I am a forensic accountant by training. I knew exactly what those numbers were doing. I didn't confront him. I called Nora instead. Nora had been my attorney for 9 years. She was 56, methodical, with reading glasses she wore pushed up on her head like a headband, and a voice that was always 2 degrees calmer than the situation required. When I laid out what Marcus had been proposing, she listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Raven, when did you last update your shareholder agreement?" I told her. She said, "Good. Now tell me, does Marcus know your grandmother left you the intellectual property documentation from your first company filing?" He did not. Almost no one did. Here's what I need to pause and tell you, because this part matters. When I was 22, fresh out of graduate school and still trying to figure out what shape my life would take, Grandma Adele had helped me file the foundational documents for what would eventually become Ashworth Financial. She was 74 at the time, sharp as a blade, and she insisted that we notarize everything separately and that she keep copies in her own safe deposit box at a bank in Oak Park, Illinois. She told me, "You'll probably never need these, but if you do, you'll need them badly." She passed away in 2018. She left me those documents in a sealed envelope with my name on it in her handwriting, along with a note that said simply, "I always knew." I kept that envelope in a fireproof box in my home office closet for 4 years without opening it. Until December of last year. If you've ever had a moment when something someone gave you years ago, something you almost forgot existed, suddenly becomes the most important object in your life, type "Grandma knew" in the comments. I read every single one. The documents were pristine. Notarized originals, certified copies, a complete chain of intellectual property ownership that established beyond any legal ambiguity that Ashworth Financial Consulting was mine, not a marital asset, not a joint venture, but a sole proprietorship with an incorporated structure I had built, funded, and grown independently prior to our marriage. Nora reviewed everything over 3 days. On December 19th, at 9:52 a.m., she called me and said, "Raven, you're in a much stronger position than you realize." I sat very still in my office while the radiator ticked quietly beside the window, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not relief. Clarity. What followed was 4 months of work I did in complete silence. I didn't change my behavior at home. I made dinner. I asked about Marcus's projects. I laughed when it was appropriate. And every single weekday, I was either in Nora's office, on a call with my financial advisor Claire, or meeting with a second attorney named Martin, who specialized in marital asset protection. I restructured 3 key contracts. I documented 26 separate instances, with dates, emails, and recorded phone calls legally obtained in Illinois, in which Marcus had made unilateral decisions about resources that were mine. I opened a separate business account. I had my company's valuation independently assessed. The number came back at $2.1 million. I kept that document in the same fireproof box that had held Grandma Adele's envelope. Meanwhile, Marcus escalated. In January, he told a mutual friend named Jonathan, knowing Jonathan would repeat it, that he was planning to consolidate their financial structures this spring. In February, he sat me down and presented what he called the final version of a restructuring proposal that would have transferred 60% of my company's equity into his holding entity within 18 months. He said it with the measured confidence of a man who had never seriously considered the word no. He slid the folder across the kitchen table at 8:34 on a Saturday morning. The coffee was still hot. Outside, it was 19 degrees. I looked at the document. I looked at him. I said, "Give me a week to review it." He said, "Of course, take your time." He actually smiled. I had filed my own papers 48 hours before that conversation. The conference room on the 14th floor smelled of recycled air and fresh printer paper. Nora had requested the meeting under the pretext of clarifying the proposed restructuring terms. Gerald, Marcus's attorney, arrived with his own folder. Marcus wore the dark blue suit he reserved for moments he expected to win. At 10:03 a.m., after the pleasantries had run their course, Nora placed a document on the table and said, "Before we address Mr. Cole's proposal, there's a filing we need to bring to your attention." The color drained from Marcus's face in stages. First his forehead, then his jaw went slack. Gerald reached for the document and read 2 sentences before his professional composure flickered. Just for a moment, just enough. What Nora placed on the table was my petition for dissolution of the marriage, filed 2 days prior, along with a formal legal notice that Ashworth Financial Consulting had been independently revalued, that its foundational documents had been certified by 3 independent notaries, that all restructuring proposals made by Marcus Cole in the preceding 14 months had been documented and were being treated as evidence of constructive coercion, and that the firm's intellectual property chain of ownership predated the marriage by 4 years and was not subject to marital division under Illinois statute. I didn't raise my voice. I had no need to. I slid the notarized originals across the table, the ones Grandma Adele had kept in a safe deposit box in Oak Park for 21 years, and I said, "Marcus, I know you believe you were protecting our shared future. I need you to understand that this company was never part of our shared anything. It was mine before you, and it remains mine now. These documents confirm that. Your attorney will want time to review them." Gerald asked for a recess. Marcus stared at the table. His hands were flat against the surface, very still, the way hands go still when a person is working hard to keep them from shaking. I thought of Grandma Adele shelling peas in the August heat. I thought of what she said. The most powerful thing a woman can own is something no one knows she has. I finally understood. Not just the words, the architecture of what she had actually done for me, quietly, 21 years before I needed it. The silence in that room did more work than anything I could have said. The weeks that followed moved with the strange efficiency of things that have already been decided. Marcus retained new counsel. Gerald apparently withdrew within the week. The petition proceeded without significant contest. The documentation left very little room for alternative interpretations. By April 14th, the dissolution was finalized. I kept the firm, the client contracts, the valuation, and the apartment I had owned outright since 2010. Marcus retained his real estate holdings, his portfolio, and the knowledge that I had watched him for 14 months without blinking. There was one conversation I hadn't expected. His mother, Eleanor, a woman who had always been polite to my face and strategically vague behind my back, called me on a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks after the filing. She said she was sorry. She said she had known Marcus had a habit of overreaching and that she had said nothing for too long. I thanked her. I told her I held no anger toward her, which was true. I told her that if she wanted a relationship with me going forward, she would need to be someone I could trust going forward. The call lasted 11 minutes. I haven't heard from her since. One morning in late May, I sat in my office with the door open and a cup of coffee going cold on the desk beside me. The firm was running. My 6 employees were at their desks. Claire had sent over projections for the next fiscal year that made me quietly exhale. Outside, it was finally warm, one of those Chicago mornings where the light comes in sideways and makes everything look briefly, improbably golden. I held the note Grandma Adele had left in the envelope. The paper was soft from years of being folded. I always knew. 3 words in handwriting I would know anywhere. I've thought a lot about what I would tell myself in 2011, standing at that fundraiser, watching Marcus Cole laugh at the right moments. I don't think I would change anything. Not because the pain didn't matter, but because I needed the full arc to understand it. What I know now is this: the preparation is the protection. Not the confrontation, not the revenge, not the moment of dramatic reckoning, though that moment does come, and it is clarifying. The protection is in what you build before the crisis, quietly, when no one is watching. If this story reached something in you, if you recognized any part of it, I want you to tell me in the comments. What was the moment you realized the person you trusted had been rewriting the terms? I read every response, every single one. If you know someone who is quietly watching, quietly building, quietly waiting for the right moment, share this with them today. And if you're new here, subscribe. There are more stories waiting in the description, and each one is true in the way that only real things are. Thank you for being here, all the way to the end. I'll see you very soon.